Pink Floyd reconvened after Ummagumma to undertake another studio album experiment that was similar to the previous one. Previously, with Ummagumma, they had released both a live album and a studio record, with the studio record being compositions from each of the band's members, and a little bit of, which resulted, should I say, in a little bit of a disaster slash really disheveled album in general. Atom Heart Mother was going to boast a similar guise, only it was going to be done with a little bit more of a tweak, and the result was a little bit better. While a lot of people aren't going to enjoy Atom Heart Mother and Ummagumma both, including the band themselves, listening to it multiple years later, I actually find Atom Heart Mother to be a little bit more of a focused and collective effort. Almost as though they had to get all of the atmospheric, all of the disjointed tracks out of the way with Ummagumma. That way they could create something that had a little bit more of a balance to it, something that had a little bit more of a framework to it. Almost as though they were getting better as they progressed. With Atom Heart Mother, you have the lengthy title track that starts it off, and then you have a couple of shorter songs such as If and Fat Old Son, and then you end with Alan's Psychedelic Breakfast. Overall, this album flows a lot better than Ummagumma ever will, and 100% this is going to be due to the fact that while the songs do have a certain instrumental quality to them, at least in the larger epics, there just seems to be a little bit more of a collective, really a collective knowledge here, or a collective ambition on this particular record. Atom Heart Mother is a very, very strong part of the early Pink Floyd catalog. It has and boasts many different little portions to it that really can become stuck into your head. And there's a orchestral and mix that's alongside of the typical guitar, the vocals, and everything like that. That's actually done in reverse compared to how they typically do it. Typically, you want to have the voice on top of the orchestral mix. That way, it becomes, it's something that you hear, something that is easily able to be pointed out. In this particular notion, it was done in reverse. They had the orchestral parts placed on top of the vocals and everything like that. And while it does soften the vocals a lot and actually buries them a little bit in the background, that's not a bad thing. In fact, the way in which this track is constructed and the songwriting on this track is actually pretty well done. It's one that was conceived fairly well in portions. Now, as an overall whole, it's slightly above average, but in portions, this is really kind of showing what Pink Floyd was kind of aspiring to get toward and would soon get to. Now, with Alan's Psychedelic Breakfast, on the other hand, this is more of just an average to slightly above average track that just seems to have a little bit more of a cohesiveness to it, a little bit more of a flow. But whenever you examine the middle part of the album with songs such as If and Fat Old Son, you start to realize just the real talent that these guys have as songwriters, Roger Waters, David Gilmour, and just the way in which the poetry is able to flow. These are very simple ideas. These are not ideas that are going to draw on the complexities of a Pink Floyd epic. Either that, or they're not tracks that are going to really involve a lot of droning or a lot of psychedelia. These are very simple, basic tracks. But at the same time, in their stripped and simplified manner, they actually are able to convey one heck of a message and seem and feel very strong whenever you listen to the album from start to finish. Overall, Atom Heart Mother is an album that, once again, was a transitional affair. One in which the band was merely experimenting around and trying to find their voice after the departure of Syd Barrett. And they had started to really ramp it up with Atom Heart Mother. This isn't necessarily a release that's going to be deemed as quintessential for the Pink Floyd buff. However, it's one that should certainly be sought out. It's an album that did fairly well in the charts, and especially over in Britain. However, the way in which I see Ummagumma and Atom Heart Mother to kind of close the book on these two albums are stepping stones. No band truly gets great or is great right away, and anybody who experiences immediate success is immediately then forced with the daunting task of backing it up with a sophomore or a junior release. Instead, with Pink Floyd, they kind of had to reconvene as a band after the departure of Barrett and kind of start from square one. And it started to make people realize that Syd actually had a lot to do with many of the major compositions that Pink Floyd had done in their early years. And that the rest of the band, while capable, were starting to find their songwriting voice. Syd definitely had one hell of a vision, and the band was starting to really develop theirs. But the next couple of albums contained visions that, well, nobody expected. The mainstream world probably did not expect to accept Pink Floyd and see Pink Floyd as such a huge and influential band on the genre. However, in just a couple of short years, Pink Floyd would not only be one of the biggest bands of the 1970s, but also one of the biggest bands in music history.